Who are Boris Johnson's real bosses? The Owen Paterson affair has revealed the extent to which Britain has a captured state, whereby the interests of Boris Johnson administration are not necessarily aligned to the public interest, but the interests of a very narrow set of private individuals and organisations. Whether that be fossil fuel investors or companies that can produce PPE with not much experience of having done so, or the Telegraph newspaper. In each of these cases, we're seeing influence of outsiders on the Prime Minister and his government. One of the really interesting aspects that emerged as the Owen Paterson affair played out was this dinner that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, had on the eve of the vote whereby the Conservative MPs voted to overturn a recommended suspension of Owen Paterson for egregious lobbying amounting to corruption. Boris Johnson flew via private jet from Glasgow, where the COP26 summit was taking place, to London's Garrick Club, which is a male exclusive all-men's club. He was there because it was a dinner for Telegraph journalists, and it was attended by former Telegraph editor and a close friend of Boris Johnson, Charles Moore. Now, it has been reported that at this dinner, aspects of Owen Paterson's lobbying were brought up. Potentially, things were discussed as to how the government should approach this. It also raises questions about where are Boris Johnson's priorities when it comes to governing the country. Was it an opportunity with Owen Paterson to actually clamp down on a standards regime, which would also see him facing serious questions about his own financial interests that we know are paramount to him because of his lifestyle, the social side of his life and how that's funded. Lord Zach Goldsmith funds holidays abroad, and we know that there's been controversy about the funding of the Downing Street flat that he shares with his wife, Carrie Johnson. So it's very possible that there's a bigger story here, which is about the Prime Minister's personality himself and the scrutiny he wants to stop not only of his government, but of himself. But where does the Telegraph newspaper come into this? Well, that meeting, that dinner at the Garrick Club raises very interesting questions about where power really lies in Britain. Arguably, a lot of the work Byline Times has done over the past 2 years is asking the question, are elements of Britain's establishment media not one of the biggest threats to democracy in this country? While the Telegraph newspaper is still remaining loyal to the Prime Minister, and again, he wrote a column for the Telegraph for £250,000 a year, which he called chicken feed, other elements of the media, however, are starting to turn. So extraordinarily, the Daily Mail newspaper had a front page headline which said sleaze had returned to Parliament following the vote on Owen Paterson and before the government's huge U-turn. Now, while many pointed out that the front page did not specifically mention Conservative sleaze, it did seem to be a turning point that this tabloid, very influential amongst Middle England, had suddenly turned against the Prime Minister. And it just goes to show that actually when elements of the mainstream media, which are very powerful and influential, want to hold the government to account and want to bring scrutiny to the Prime Minister's actions, they can do that. So it's very much a case of them doing it when they want to and not doing it when they don't want to. And let's not forget that Dominic Cummings said that Boris Johnson often referred to the Daily Telegraph as his real boss. So who are Boris Johnson's real bosses? The Owen Paterson affair has finally lifted the lid on corruption in Britain's political system. The question is, why has it taken us so long to get there? One of the most insidious aspects, which is a real danger to British democracy, is a very imperial form of English exceptionalism, which is still so embedded in this country. We don't think that we could be corrupt. We're not Russia, we're not Viktor Orban's Hungary, but we shouldn't forget that when we talk about Narendra Modi's India, for instance, and we talk about how corrupt it has been and how corruption has fed into that country's coronavirus response, we should be asking a question about Britain. Why is it a country such as India, after so many years of British rule, is so corrupt? When we talk about corruption being far removed from Britain, it's useful to remember our history. Operation Legacy was a state-sanctioned burning of thousands and thousands of documents relating to British Empire. In the 60s and 70s, as colonies one by one gained their independence, The government burnt, put into rivers, and destroyed many documents which shed light on how they had operated in the colonies. Why remove this material? It's a cover-up, and that cover-up is still continuing today. So corruption isn't something that Britain is somehow magically immune to. Arguably, it has exported it to other areas of the world. This whole scandal has definitely shed light on the fact that corruption is not something that's in faraway lands. It is in Britain's corridors of power. And it's really important that we fight this, because otherwise our democratic system becomes more and more eroded. And one of the ways that we can do this is by channeling the power of truly independent investigative journalism. Now, Byline Times over the past year has been following different elements of state capture, especially to do with the Conservative Party and PPE contracts and private interests and donors to the Conservative Party. All of these elements make up a bigger picture of corruption, which we have been piecing together alongside other elements in the independent media. And now is the time for us to support real journalism that aims to shed a light, because it does have an impact. The government did U-turn. The politicians' pressure from the opposition benches did matter. So we can't be hopeless about our politics. Things can still change, but we got to believe that we have something worth fighting for. Boris Johnson's time in power has shown, like nothing else truly can in recent times, the power truly independent investigative journalism can have, and why it's so important that we all need to support it. Now, if you believe in this mission like I do, then please do support Byline Times, and also head over to Patreon and sign up to Double Down News.